What's your local urban legend? It's a balmy summer night in the early 1990s, somewhere in an anonymous town in the continental United States. A town not unlike your own. A car full of college students pulls up to the parking lot of what used to be a laundromat that's been closed for the past 5 years. Outside the building, a single phone booth stands, a beacon of eerie light against the darkness of the vacant lot. This is what the teenagers are here for. Not to fool around and drink beer in the abandoned laundromat like you might expect. They're here for the phone booth. Visiting the booth is a rite of passage for the local kids. According to legend, it's haunted, and if a person gets into it alone and picks up the receiver, they'll be told a terrible secret. Not that anyone is ever brave enough to tell their story afterwards. The boy driving the car, a short, scrawny mall goth by the name of Edmund, swears up and down that it works. He's a townie and knows all of the local lore. "I came out here last Halloween," he explains, "and I saw Brian Miles break down crying." The other students in the car still think he's lying. Brian is the school's star quarterback, and none of them can imagine him crying in any circumstances, least of all because of something he heard over the phone. "They're not always bad calls," Edmund explains. "Sometimes you get a good one, but you'll never know unless you try." The students all get out of the car and line up, waiting to use the phone. Egged on by the other members of the group, Edmund goes first. He steps into the booth, and the phone rings. When he picks it up, there's a female voice on the other end.
"Hello, Edmund,"
the voice says.
"It's Heather. I want you to know that I'm really sorry for how I used to pick on you when we were kids. The truth is, it's because I had a crush on you but was too scared to do anything about it. I'd really like it if you called me sometime."
Edmund hangs up. James is the next person to try the phone. When he picks it up, the voice on the other end is his father's.
"Son,"
his father says with a heavy sigh.
"I think it's about time I told you that your mother and I are getting a divorce."
James hangs up, unsure what to feel about what he's just heard. He goes back to sit in the car. The next person to step up to the plate is... well, I don't know how else to say this. It's you. Yes, you, watching this right now. You were in the car with all the others. Now you're standing at the phone booth, picking up the receiver, and listening for the voice on the other end. And in the strangest turn of events, the voice on the other end is me, Dr. Bob, of the Dr. Bob YouTube channel. My voice is saying,
"Listen, your name. I know we don't often get to talk, but I can't hold it in any longer. I need to tell you to subscribe to my YouTube channel so I can show up on your feed and hit the bell to get notifications every time I upload. And if you want to take this to the next level,
you can join my Patreon too and get exclusive bonus goodies like uncensored videos, voting rights on my next topics, and behind-the-scenes material. It's a really good deal." You nod and hang up, knowing exactly what you must do. Next up is Janet, one of the girls. She volunteers to go next because she's new to this group of friends and is eager to impress. She takes a deep breath and steps inside. The phone rings. She picks it up. "Hello?" she says into the receiver.
"Hey, Janet."
The voice on the other end is the voice of Sophie, her best friend since they were kids.
"As soon as you left to go to college, I started hooking up with Jason. Only a few times and I stopped, but I feel really terrible about it."
Janet's face goes red and she slams the phone down. Jason is the name of her boyfriend, who she hadn't had a chance to talk to in a few months. The last member of the group to use the phone is Tamara, another townie who always tries to act tough to impress the boys. She picks up the receiver.
"Hello, Tamara?"
Tamara doesn't immediately recognize the voice on the other line. She asks him, "Who am I speaking to?"
"I knew your friend, Kate,"
says the voice,
"before she went missing."
A cold sweat comes over Tamara. Kate went missing 5 years ago. The police had started calling it a cold case. "What do you mean?" she asks. "Why would you tell me that?"
"Because I killed her,"
says the voice.
"It's eating me alive. I had to tell someone."
The voice on the other end describes more details about her friend, details that he would only know if he was telling the truth. Tamara can't stand it anymore. She hangs up the phone and leaves the booth. The others ask what the phone said, but she doesn't feel like she can tell them. She walks home, not wanting to stick around any longer than she needs to. The next day, she reports what she heard to the police, but is unable to explain how she knew where the killer hid the body. Stress, tears, fits of rage, and sometimes even relief. These feelings are standard for anyone interacting with SCP-467, the Confessional phone booth. This anomaly is a seemingly ordinary phone booth that, when entered, will receive a call from a person the subject knows. It doesn't matter if they're alive or dead. In fact, the call seems to be entirely within the subject's head, as call records confirm that no actual incoming calls ever take place. During the call, the person on the other line will divulge secrets, things that the subject receiving the call would have no possible way of knowing. These secrets range in nature from innocuous to inflammatory to downright sinister in many cases. When the SCP Foundation first became aware of the Confessional phone booth back in the early 90s, their first course of action to try and stop the occurrences was to simply disconnect the phone. This worked well enough for a while, but then, as the new millennium went on and personal cell phones became more and more common, reports of the haunted phone started to circulate again. As it turns out, the booth itself, not the phone, was the source of the anomaly. As long as a person is within the booth, any personal communication device that they have will become an extension of the booth's psychic influence. Once this was learned, the booth was removed completely and taken to anomalous artifact storage. The phone never even has to ring, even though witnesses, including the subject, will remember a call having taken place. Analysis of video logs has shown that the subjects never pick up the phone at all. Despite this, the calls can be picked up via audio recording devices placed inside the booth. Another limitation that has been discovered about SCP-467 is that it only allows one call per person per day. If a person who has already spoken to someone through the phone booth steps back into it within 24 hours, nothing will happen. Because of the nature of D-Class personnel, many of the tests produced calls of the more inflammatory and salacious nature. One D-Class, who had been a repeat violent offender, received a call from his mother.
"I'm so ashamed,"
she was reported as having said through tears.
"I feel it must have been my fault that you turned out like this. I didn't raise you or your brothers right."
After this call, the D-Class was very disturbed, and for a few days asked for permission to call his family. He was denied the request. On the complete opposite side of things, another D-Class who had been on death row for a brutal murder he'd committed many years ago got a call from the family of one of his victims. The girl's father was the one who did most of the talking. He told the D-Class that even though they'd never forget what happened, he felt that someday they would be able to forgive. It was a strange thing to hear, and the D-Class was notably uncomfortable for the rest of the day. Another D-Class who had been convicted of assault got a direct call from one of his victims. She was still alive and had done a lot of healing since he had attacked her. She told him that she'd moved to a new city and started a group for women to learn self-defense. Though the D-Class didn't know how to feel about this call at the time, he was seen to have improved morale over the next few days. Not all of the calls were quite so heavy. One D-Class received a call from a researcher who was present in the room at the moment, although of course this researcher was never witnessed so much as picking up the phone. Over the call, the researcher told the D-Class that he had an ugly haircut. The D-Class left the booth and confronted the researcher about it. The researcher admitted that, yes, he did think the D-Class's haircut was, quote, pretty stupid. The D-Class was annoyed at first, but pretty soon everyone was able to have a good laugh about it. Others weren't quite as lucky. One D-Class, another convicted murderer, just heard the voice of his victim screaming with rage for 5 whole minutes. Another D-Class heard something that upset him so much that he flew into a violent rage, punctuated by fits of hysterical sobbing. We don't know what it is that he heard. He was impossible to console and had to be terminated after he lashed out at the researcher conducting the test. Another D-Class actually received a call from himself when he tested the booth. This D-Class, who had been involved in a far-right terrorist organization and was on death row for the assassination of a politician in his home city, heard his own voice on the call, describing repressed homosexual desires.
"If I had been more honest about myself,"
the voice said,
"maybe I wouldn't have ended up here in the first place."
This did not go over very well with that particular D-Class, and he immediately tried to destroy the booth. His termination by staff followed soon after. In another instance of the booth speaking to a person in their own voice, for one test, the researchers used a test subject who had been used for amnestic testing to see what would happen. The subject received a call from their own voice, describing details that the subject had forgotten due to the amnestics. The subject was confused, and the researchers wondered briefly if this experience would cause the subject to regain lost memories in the long term. It did not. Dr. Reitz, the lead researcher on SCP-467, has also personally tested the booth a number of times. It's unsure what the nature of the calls were on any of the occasions. The first time, the recording equipment was disconnected, and he has been unwilling to divulge the nature of the call to anyone else. Whatever the topic of conversation was, however, the other researchers noted that Dr. Wrights became significantly depressed and expressed doubts about his work at the Foundation that he'd never voiced previously. After a few days, though, he seemed to recover. The second test done by Dr. Wrights was far more concerning. Recordings picked up the voice of a young child on the other end. Seemingly as soon as Dr. Wrights recognized the voice, he shut off all recording equipment and demanded that the test log be completely stricken from the record. Dr. Iceberg, another senior researcher on the team, had a similar, though less distressing, experience when he tested the booth. Much like with Dr. Wrights, the topic of his conversation was not recorded. We can only assume that it was bad, because 2 days later, he got into a physical altercation with another Site-17 researcher and was given a full reprimand. Some research has suggested that the booth even works on non-human intelligences. So far, the only other anomaly that has been tested with the booth has been SCP-1599, the broken spybot. SCP-1599 received a call from its creator, claiming that they had lost its signal and were unable to recover it. However, SCP-1599 flatly denied that this message could have come from its creator, instead accusing the Foundation scientists of playing a trick on it. Another interesting piece to the puzzle that is SCP-467, the calls have been observed to get increasingly bizarre and disturbing close to the American winter holidays, particularly Thanksgiving and Christmas. The first recorded instances of subjects receiving calls from their own voices, for example, happened in early December and late November. This period is also when calls from deceased people become more frequent. Even stranger, during the holiday season, there have also been instances of people getting calls from non-existent people. In one case, it was simply a voice that the subject didn't recognize, talking about things that either never happened or happened to someone else. In another, it was a voice claiming to be the subject's childhood imaginary friend. The working theory as to why the booth's calls get more unusual during the holidays is that this is a response to the combination of general high stress levels and increased social pressure to ignore or downplay interpersonal conflicts, leading to more repressed feelings. This, however, doesn't entirely explain how the phone booth seems to be occasionally able to make things up from whole cloth. It would seem the true nature of the booth is as something that encourages people to be more honest with each other. No matter how hard you try to keep secrets from the people around you, the phone booth will conjure up a version of you who will happily divulge even your deepest, darkest secrets. But it's unclear if the forces behind this anomaly intended for this to be to our detriment or our benefit. Sometimes being told a secret can feel like a weight being lifted off your shoulders. Other times it leads to chaos, and all you can do is wish you had never heard it. If you went into the phone booth, who do you think would be calling you? And what do you think they'd have to say to you? Thank you for watching, and to continue your anomalous education, I recommend you check out another one of my case files, like SCP-971, Exotic Fast Food Delivery.